The following broadcast is a presentation of Mount Zion Media Ministry.
The subject of the sermon this morning is a question for each of you, and I want you to just take your hand and look at it. And the question for you is, what's in your hand? That's the subject of the sermon. What's in your hand? At the center of this text and this story today, that really begins in chapter 1, is Moses. Moses gets a visit from God in chapter 3. And in chapter 3, God comes to Moses, and he's on the backside of the mountain keeping sheep because his profession is that of a shepherd. And God comes to him and set a bush on fire. And Moses is curious enough to stop what he's doing, turn, and go and investigate this burning bush. And the reason it deserves investigation because he's seen bushes burn before, but he has never seen a bush burn and was not consumed. In other words, there was fire, but the leaves were not being burned up. They maintained their integrity, their color. Nothing happened to the leaves. And when he turned to see, God spoke to him out of the burning bush. And God said to him, Moses, my people have been in slavery for 400 years, and they have cried out to me for deliverance. And Moses, I am going to deliver them, but I need me a human partner. And so I am calling you to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. And hear me, God comes to Moses to ask Moses to join him in his purpose. And here's what I don't want you to miss. Moses' destiny is tied to God's purpose. His destiny is not tied to his purpose, but to God's. And so here in this encounter, he discovers God's purpose and therefore his destiny in life. You want to know where your destiny is? Get in God's purpose, and God will show you your destiny based on his purpose and not yours. God is not obligated to come along beside you for your own purpose that you dream up. And that's why when you dream big dreams, you got to make sure they are God's dreams. And so God says to him, I want you to go and tell them to let my people go. And Moses began to raise objections about why he can't go. Who am I? Why should they listen to me? I'm nobody. I don't have a pedigree. I don't have a background. I don't have a clout. I'm just a shepherd on the backside of the mountain. I can't talk plain. I have a speech impediment. I can't be your spokesman. And one objection after another, he raises, and God meets every objection and says, yes, but I have still chosen you. And while Moses is raising his objections, God asked this shepherd, what's in your hand? And he says, a rod. And he's right. It's a rod. And it's his rod. It's the shepherd's rod. And for 40 years, Moses has been working with this rod. The purpose of this rod, the shepherd's rod, is to assist Moses in leading the sheep. It's a weapon if the sheep are under attack to fight with, to fight the wolves and whatever other prey, whatever devourer comes to prey on the sheep. He uses this to help protect them, but also sometimes to prod them and to lift them up if they have fallen, to help them along the way. And it is to assist him in all of his walking, in all of his standing, and this is his rod. And he got it 40 years before this encounter when he had to flee from Egypt as a fugitive because he had committed murder. Don't miss this. He's a fugitive. He's on the run. And there he is. God finds him on the backside of the mountain. Again, God says, what's in your hand? He says, a rod. Why is God asking him what's in his hand? Because God is getting ready to show him something. God has given him an assignment, folk, and he feels that he doesn't have what he needs to execute the assignment. But God is getting ready to show him that he already has everything that he needs. He doesn't need to look out there somewhere or over there somewhere, but everything he needs, he already has. Because the God who called him is also the God who will qualify and equip him. And what you've got to understand is that God orchestrates, God uses, God works out everything together for your good. And so all of Moses' experiences up until this point, his gifts and his talents, God has been working them for this day when he gets his assignment. What's in your hand? A rod. Moses, I need you to look with different eyes, because what you have in your hand is not a rod. Not after today. It's going to be something else. Listen at me real close. God is getting ready to help Moses. Moses is getting ready to go through a transformation, but he can't do it unless he's able to see with new eyes. God has a transformation for you, for me, but you can't do it unless you can see through new eyes. And you see through new eyes one or two ways. One way is God has to bring somebody new to look at what's in your hand with fresh eyes, whose mind has not been trapped by the past, by what it has been, so much so that you can't see what it can be. And then, but for those people who are open enough to let God take the same person and give you new eyes, then you can look with the new eye and see that what you had in your hand, the purpose of it in the past, is no longer what you have and has been repurposed. In verse 17 that I read, he said, I need you to go on down there to Pharaoh, and the rod in your hand is going to be used for signs, for miracles. Because one of his objections, when I go, they're not going to believe me. And God gave him his name. He said, who am I going to say sent me? Tell him I am that I am. But Lord, I still need some help. And so what God does, because Pharaoh got an army. Pharaoh got power. The people don't believe him. And so God gives him something that's stronger than Pharaoh's army, stronger than the people's unbelief, a rod. And it doesn't give him a new rod, but the same rod repurposed. So he says it's going to be used for a sign. And listen, here it is. In the last verse I read, verse 20, said that when Moses got up out of there, he went out with the rod of God. When God met him, it was his. But when he go to carry out his assignment, it's God's. His rod has been surrendered to God. While it was in his hand, he gave it to God. You better hear me. God cannot bless what's in your hand until you give it to him. As long as you keep it and you own it, it's your rod. And the only power it has is your power. But when you give it to God and it becomes God's rod, then God puts power on it. And God said, let me give you a foretaste of what you're working with. He said to him in that 4th chapter, throw it on the ground. He said, now look back at it. And the rod became a snake. And Moses jumped back, and God said, don't jump back, jump forward. Catch it by the tail and pick it up. And watch it come back to a rod again. And Moses leaves now knowing that the rod he has is a brand new rod. And so he goes out and can I tell you something? I told you Pharaoh had an army, he had power, the people had unbelief, they didn't know whether to trust Moses, but you just keep reading in Exodus 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, 10, when Moses had to go up against Pharaoh, all his whole entourage, his army, his power, and all he had was a rod. So he gets before Moses, and he want to show what he's working with. So he throw the rod down like he did in the wilderness, turned to a snake. Moses says, Pharaoh says, that ain't nothing. I got magicians. Their rods can do that. And so they throw their rods down, and their rods turn to a snake. Okay, I got another one for you. You say you're not going to let God's people go? Well, God told me to tell you that because you won't let his people go, he's going to turn all the water, the rivers, and the lakes and the streams, all of your drinking source will be turned to blood. And here's how it's going to turn to blood. I'm going to the banks of the river. And when I strike the river bank with this rod, all the water in Egypt is going to turn to blood. It won't be drinking water, bathing water, cooking water until I take this rod and cause a reversal to happen. And so, boom! And with the touch of the rod, all the water turned to blood. Pharaoh got scared for a minute and begged, and he got it back. And then God sends another challenge and said, I want the frogs to come. I'm going to let them spend a night with the frogs. I want frogs to invade the kingdom. I want frogs in the bed, frogs in the refrigerator, frogs in the kitchen. I want frogs everywhere. And look, all you got to do, Moses, is just stretch out the rod. And when you stretch out the rod, frogs going to start coming from everywhere. And frogs came only because he stretched out his rod. He called plagues of lice, plagues of locusts, plagues of hail, all kind of plagues, and all he had to do was stretch out his rod. And then in chapter 14, after Pharaoh realized he was no match for the rod, he let him go free, but then he had a change of heart. And so there they are, chapter 14, they're at the Red Sea, no way across. Pharaoh's army closing in on them, mountains on both sides. And the people started crying and complaining, Moses, you brought us out here. You should have left us alone. Here we are here. We don't have no bridge, no boats. We just can't get across. And Pharaoh's army coming. God said, Moses, tell them all to shut up and stand still. And the pillar of a cloud that was leading them by night, God caused it to rewind and go back. And it created so much darkness for the Egyptian army that they couldn't see. They had to stand still. But the same cloud that made darkness for them made light for the Israelites. And you know why he kept it light? Because all night long, he said, Moses, raise your rod. And as long as that rod was raised, the Bible says all night long, God caused the Red Sea to roll back. And the people were able to go across on dry ground. They ran out of water. God said, just strike a rock, not with your feet. Don't hocus pocus, kuda. Just touch it with a rock. The deliverance of the people was tied to the rod because God had transformed it, repurposed it for the people's deliverance. This rod was for the salvation of the people. And hear me, salvation means two things. God brings you out of what you're in to take you into what he wants you to have. I told you that story to teach you a little about the Bible, but more than anything, to transition right here and to say to you and to me that God has given every one of us a rod. And what we've got to do is decide what it is that's in our hand. And you don't need him to bring it to you. You already got it. You either need somebody with new eyes to show you the potential of what's in your hand, or you need to surrender your will, your thoughts, your old ways to God and say, God, I want to look with new eyes, and you help me to see what I really have in my hand. Because your salvation, the salvation of the people, could be in your hand. God has a purpose, and he wants you to be a partner. God has destiny for you, and he wants you to achieve it, but you can't achieve it apart from him. And so God says, what's in your hand? What's in your hand? Can you see it? Look at your hand, because I need your imagination now. I need you to know and to know something. And so let's just have a little some lessons here. And so what I have in my hand, for those of you that can see, peanuts. And for years, people have eaten peanuts. They boil them, they put them in the oven, they bake them, and they eat them. But somebody had peanuts in their hand one day and saw more than peanuts. In fact, it was 1896. The Southern economy was on the verge of bankruptcy because Southern farmers didn't know but one way to plant and one crop. And so they planted cotton and more cotton. And for a while, cotton was king, and they were making money. But then the cotton depleted the nutrients in the soil that was needed for the cotton to grow. And since no nutrients, they planted, but there was no major harvest. But then a brother, a former slave named George Washington Carver, said, I got some peanuts in my hand. And in growing peanuts, they replace in the soil what the cotton takes out. So start this cycle of rotation, rotate cotton, peanut, and what you will have is a restoration of the soil. Okay, we got peanuts. What we gonna do? We can't do but two things: bake them, boil them. No, let me tell you something. In my hand, I see peanut butter. I see peanut brittle candy. I see peanut soup. I see cooking oil. I'm tired of eating lard from the pig. I see some cooking oil in my hand. I see a multiplicity of uses for peanuts that nobody's ever seen. We had the same peanuts. I've been looking at them too, but now I see with new eyes. And there's a fledgling university in Tuskegee called Tuskegee University, and I see it as a way to bring young minds, to teach them of the opportunities available and bring attention to this small university and say to the world that we have the gift in our hand that can lead to the salvation of this nation. What's in your hand? Down in Cairo, they call them pendants. Peanuts, pendants. Or do you see an opportunity? What's in your hand? What's in your hand, Simmons? It's an apple. You eat them. They're good. But when I was a little boy, there was a woman lived in Cairo named Anna Norwood. And everybody around town, the neighborhood, called her Miss Anna. And so Miss Anna got injured on a job and had to go home. And she was working for this company that didn't have a real benefit package. And so her retirement disability from the job was $1 a year for every year she'd been working. And so she ended up, after 25 years, getting $25 a month. And then she had a little Social Security, but she couldn't meet her needs. And so she said, I've been holding apples and eating apples, but I see this apple with new eyes. This apple is a new stream of income. This apple will pay my taxes. This apple will pay my utility bills and help me pay my tithe and offering in church. This apple gonna make up for what my employer didn't do. And so I don't think I'm gonna eat this apple, but I'm going to town. I'm giving some Karo syrup and a little color. And then I'm gonna make some candy apples. And I told you the folk call her Miss Anna, but I call her Mom because she was my grandmama. And so Mom made apples, and she called all of her grandchildren and said, now, I'm making these apples, and on the weekend, on Friday and Saturday, I want y'all to go door to door and sell my apples. And so we started selling these candy apples, and they were caramel and red, and they got so popular, we didn't have to take them to door. People started lining up outside of Miss Anna's house, because see, before Miss Anna, we just got candy apples when the fair came. But Miss Anna said, who says you can only have candy apples when the fair comes? And who says you can only get apples at the fair? You can get apples in the hood, in the hotbed. And so Miss Anna put apples in the hood, in the hotbed. And let me tell you something else Miss Anna did. Miss Anna used her little grandchildren to sell the apples, and so her grandchildren learned how to count money. I learned how to count money in Miss Anna's yard selling apples, and you had to get it right because Miss Anna would hurt you if you didn't have money right. But Miss Anna also did something I don't think she intended to do. She intended to make some extra money, create a stream of income, but Miss Anna also planted a seed in her grandchildren that suggested you couldn't just depend on somebody else, but discover what's in your hand and learn how to make it for yourself. Can anybody here know what a honey dripple is? Well, see, Miss Anna was the first person in Cairo too. It got hot, and so some of the children didn't have enough money for candy apple, so she got some Kool-Aid, put a little extra sugar in it, froze it on a cup, stuck a stick in it, and then I started selling honey drippers in the front yard to the little children. She didn't cry. Oh, I ain't got nothing but a check. I'm on a fixed income. I can't. Miss Anna took matters. She saw what was in her hand. What's in your hand? What's in your hand? Some yarn. And so I yarn and I make little afghans and little throw things for, you come to my house, I got some throw across chair and it's just a hobby. I just do it. Just to have something to do, just yarn, to make little things for me, But in Miss Constance Williams' hand, this is not just yarn, it's a mission. So she takes the yarn and makes these little hats because God said there are babies being born around the world who go out in weather. And for various reasons, families don't have hats for their heads. So I'm making hats, and I'm bringing them to Mount Zion, and I want Mount Zion to ship them wherever babies have needs, and their heads will be covered. All because she could see with new eyes what was in her hand. And unless you've ever been so poor, that you couldn't afford the necessities of life, you don't know what this means to a little baby in a cold environment. I'm almost through. What's in your hand? What? Young folk, old folk, except for Deacon Jones, you got a flip phone. This don't apply to you. He ain't the only one here got a flip phone. Some of y'all got one. And in all fairness, he said he don't need all that. He just want to talk. He don't text. He don't. I'm not mad at you, but what's in your hand? Is this simply a device for you to talk, to text, to be social, to post stuff to your various outlets and to read other people's comments? Is it just something where you play Candy Crush, or is it something that you look at eye candy? I had to slow down because y'all slow. What is it? What is it? It shouldn't be just something that you consume other people's content. But in your hand is potential. Because what you have in your hand in every app you go on has made somebody else wealthy. All of the content and the posts you read following other people has developed for them not only a network to make income, but they are shaping the way you think, the way you live, just by the content they are putting on this device in your hand. Because they don't see it like you see it. So why can't you look differently at your own phone? Where is your app? Where is the content that you put that's going to enhance somebody's life? Because what you eat and where you are really don't add value to other people's lives. And these here poses, you put on your best, even when you go to church, when you get ready to take your church picture, you can't just stand up. There's a time and a place for that. But it ain't now. Preach, Pastor, I'm trying. Bible says there's a time and place for everything, but don't let your arm at Mount Zion. So, where's your content? Where is your stuff? What are you using? What kind of brand are you building for yourself? What kind of platform are you developing? What kind of followers are you seeking? There are those of you who want to be on television, you want to be famous. Well, you don't need a television contract anymore. All you got to do is you can create your own television on YouTube, television channel, free. But you got to have something out there. And I won't tell y'all who, but so for example, there are a couple of people I follow. There's one comedian, for example, I follow on Instagram. He got millions, more than 1 million followers. And then after he got famous on here, then people started calling him. But he started here because he created followers. And I won't tell y'all his name because y'all start judging me. Why Pastor listening at him? I have to have some laughter to get my mind off y'all.
Thanks for watching. Be blessed and continue walking in the light.